All right, hello everyone, and welcome to another Obi-Wan Kenobi breakdown. Today, we will be talking about part 5 of the Obi-Wan Kenobi Disney Plus series. However, we'll give you a blanket spoiler warning for everything Star Wars related, whether that's any of the movies, any of the TV shows, both live action and animated, just blanket spoiler warning, specifically covering things kind of around like Clone Wars and maybe the original trilogy prequels, that kind of stuff. But spoiler warning, you are warned. Let's get into it, huh? We're just gonna jump right into it. We opened this episode actually with a trigger warning. I popped up right away on the screen, and I was immediately like, "Oh, we're getting another Order 66. Like, we're gonna see another rendition of this again." Dave Filoni has been not been shy about showing us Order 66 in the many perspectives from around the galaxy. So it's kind of shocking to see that we're going to be getting another Order 66. At least that's what I thought initially, is like we're going to get an Order 66. And we don't get it off the bat, but instead we are welcomed into this episode with the amazing Hayden Christensen as Padawan Anakin and young Master Obi-Wan Kenobi. I thought they both looked great, especially Obi-Wan. I'm not sure if they did re-imaging for it or if it was just makeup with a bit of editing, but I thought it looked great. I was looking at images from the 2002 Attack of the Clones and comparing them to this episode. Obviously, Hayden and Anakin in Attack of the Clones was a Padawan. You could see he still had the Padawan braid in this flashback. And I thought they actually looked great, especially being 20 years apart between the filming of Attack of the Clones and this episode. Obi-Wan looked incredible. It's hard to beat how great Ewan McGregor actually looks, and I think that side by side with him and Hayden playing Anakin, again, it made Anakin look a little too old, but that's just because of how good Ewan still looks and how good the makeup, and whether they used re-imaging or de-aging with him, I'm not sure. But regardless, I thought they both looked great in this flashback scene. Now, regarding the scene in general, I've seen some great callouts online about Anakin looking towards Padme's apartment, just wanting to see her again and be with her, because this is ultimately before they are married. So him just like yearning to be with her and thinking about her even before they meet up again. It's hard to tell if this is actually like right before Attack of the Clones or not, but just yearning to be with her is something to see just to start out this episode. We have some great banter back and forth between Anakin and Obi-Wan in this sparring sequence throughout the whole entire episode. There's a lot of obvious parallels. So much of it takes place not only in this series but also in their future to come, especially in Revenge of the Sith. Two things that I noticed that weren't direct parallels to this specific episode, but to their shared history, was a sequence which mirrors their fight that takes place on Mustafar at the end of Revenge of the Sith. Both of them spinning and twirling their blades around each other. I actually saw a great gif of them stitching together that scene with the scene from Revenge of the Sith, and it looks amazing. And again, there's a sequence in which Anakin is hammering down on Obi-Wan as he's on his knees trying to defend himself in the sparring sequence, and this is the exact same thing that we see happen in part 3 of this series. I'm not really surprised by this, seeing that when these two people would actually face off against each other, it would make sense that their sparring in the fights that they've had, fights in air quotes, their sparring, would kind of boil over into their actual encounters. It just goes to show how Star Wars, and as George Lucas has said, is it's poetry and everything rhymes. There are so many parallels that we see throughout this whole episode outside of even just this sparring sequence. Those are just a couple that I wanted to call out early that we don't see take place in this particular episode, but we have seen before. We cut away from the sparring session when their blades first touch. We find Darth Vader on the bridge of his Star Destroyer meeting with Reva. After informing Vader that they have tracked down Obi-Wan to Jabim, he has her kneel and grants her the position of the Grand Inquisitor. A position that she clearly wants, but ultimately is not her endgame, but more on that later. On Jabim, our rebels return. Obi-Wan informs Roken that they need to get Leia back to Alderaan. Broken says he will help after everyone is out of there, only having a few hours to use this trade route to get everyone through and off that planet. We see a family in the background, and if you have closed captioning on, you can actually hear the mother comforting the child, saying, "It's all right, the path will protect us." Obi-Wan sees this and knows that although Leia is his mission, these people cannot be casualties because of them, telling Roken he'll do whatever he can to help. Here we start to see Obi-Wan like we knew him before. He's there to help those that are in need, something that he really had to grow back into over the course of this series. We see the Empire closing in on Jabeam. Vader tells Reva to lock down the facilities. She informs him that they can hold out for days. "It's not them we need to break," Vader responds. Vader knows Obi-Wan, and in turn, Obi-Wan knows Vader. They know each other's desires and their morals. Vader knows that they need to break Obi-Wan, that he will give himself up to save the others. Obi-Wan, in turn, knows that Vader knows this about him. It's a great chess match that we see between these two that play out not only in their strategies, but in their actual physical combat, and not only in current timeline of this episode, but in the sparring session that we see cut throughout. Back on Jabeam, Obi-Wan finds another wall scratched with messages and symbols, and again we see the Jedi crest there, like the ones that he saw earlier in Part 3 on Mapuzo. He reads one of the messages out loud. "The light will fade, but is never forgotten." The light being a reference to the light side of the Force, and an amazing parallel for how Obi-Wan described the Force to Leia in Part 3. The feeling of turning the light back on after being in a dark room. An amazing analogy for Obi-Wan's arc throughout this whole series. Obi-Wan turning that light on and knowing that the Force and the Jedi, may fade, but it is never forgotten. The great overarching Star Wars theme of hope. Obi-Wan finds all the lightsabers and the Jedi robes that have been left. We can see him realize that there have been others out there. They must be strong to help them and help the light come back on. We cut to Lola, marked with a restraining bolt, sabotaging the whole base and trapping everyone inside just as the Imperial Star Destroyer arrives. Obi-Wan senses that it's Vader. He will attack next. He has no patience for a siege. Here we start to see this chess match start to play out. "How do you know?" asks Roken. We cut to the sparring session. "You grow too aggressive, Anakin. Be mindful," Obi-Wan told him. "Mercy doesn't defeat an enemy master, which is why you're gonna lose." A lot of these things that Anakin says is something that we could easily have inferred on our own, but hearing them play out so early in his Jedi career really sets in the mindset that Anakin had from the beginning, to always having to prove himself to be the best, always wanting to win, and thinking that he would know more than Obi-Wan, his own master. The training session, which seems to be on the forefront of both Vader and Obi-Wan's mind, sets the stage for how each of them are going to play out this entire encounter. Vader, ready to show no mercy. Obi-Wan on the defensive, but trying to prevail with his wit. "They are better equipped and better trained. If we try and fight them, we will not survive," Obi-Wan tells the group. "We don't need to fight them, we just need to hold them off long enough to get you all out." Obi-Wan knowing what needs to be done in order to survive, to outsmart Anakin. Leia offers up her help, climbing into the vents to help open the siege doors. Her electrical work is a direct parallel to Leia that we see on the base of Hoth in Episode 5. In fact, there's actually a lot of this battle that's going to take place here resembles the battle of the opening scene of Empire Strikes Back. The rebels trying to hold off a base from the Empire just long enough for them to all evacuate. And yet again, we see a parallel between the Obi-Wan episodes, this being Part 5, and the Skywalker saga movies, Empire Strikes Back being Episode 5. Obi-Wan receives a message from Bail. Bail worries that the worst has happened, tells Obi-Wan that he's going to go to Tatooine to watch over Luke. Also giving up some highly sensitive information here to whoever may come in contact with this device. And again, more on that later. But as we come to know in Star Wars, security isn't much of a concern to most people. Tala suspects something is up. Obi-Wan, looking kind of worried, but says everything will be all right. Not sure if he's trying to reassure her or himself. Tala goes on to share a pretty dark story, telling Obi-Wan that she, as an Imperial officer, rounded up 4 families on Garel and had them killed. Only later she found out the reasoning wasn't because of taxes, which is what she was originally told, but because they were force sensitive. Ultimately, seems kind of like her breaking point with the Empire. Tala said she was helpless at the time, but because of that, she now does what she does, trying to save families and their kids from the Inquisitors. She shows Obi-Wan the tally mark she has on her holster. 1 for everyone I got through. Some things you can't forget, but you can fight to make them better. A direct parallel and callback to the previous episode, Obi-Wan telling her that it's hard to forget the bad things that have happened to him. Tala showing him that, yeah, it may be hard to forget, but you can learn from it and still help and save many people. It's truly deep and amazing stuff from Tala, a real standout character in the series that I've really loved and I didn't really see coming, but she's amazing. Her character is so well written. You know what her motives are. You feel the emotions behind her actions and her stories. It really makes the viewer just root for her and her cause. The attack on the base begins. The third sister begins raining down heavy artillery on the doors, trying to break them open. Obi-Wan, knowing they will get in soon, asks to talk to Reva. It was cool to see once Obi-Wan got to the door, he actually reaches out with the Force here and really is trying to feel Reva, her thoughts, and her emotions during this conversation. And I believe it's the first real conversation that we have between Obi-Wan and Reva, other than Reva yelling at him as he's fleeing. And here we finally get the backstory for Reva played out. You mean Anakin, Obi-Wan says as Reva mentions Vader, trying to feel her emotions and her reaction to his name. Obi-Wan ultimately pulls it out of Reva that she was a youngling and was at the temple on the night of Order 66. We see the flashback of her as a youngling in the beginning of the series. Very deep and disturbing images of Anakin, then Vader, walking into the temple, the iconic scene from Revenge of the Sith. I didn't expect that we would see prequel Anakin at all. I thought it would be kind of cool to get a flashback, but I didn't expect to see him really. But let alone seeing both Padawan Anakin from Attack of the Clones and Anakin from Revenge of the Sith in the same episode. The prequel kids and the prequel fans really rejoicing out on the internet this past week because of this episode. Through Reva's vision, we watch as Anakin starts swinging and cutting down the children. We see how much this memory has damaged Reva as we see her relive those moments. The fear and terror shown on her face in both the present and the past flashback, you can really feel how much that memory just lives with her and resides with her and how much she thinks about that. Reva reveals that she literally had to play dead so that she was not found, lying next to the dead younglings, the only family she ever really had. Again, a parallel from Part 3, Obi-Wan describing that he never really knew his family, and no Jedi ever really does, but instead they make a new family in the Order. Reva not only got ripped away from her family to become a Jedi, but had to watch as her family and her new family was now murdered by someone that they all trusted. Obi-Wan says they want the same thing, but when asked if he really wants Anakin dead, we see on Obi-Wan's face that he really doesn't. At least it seems that way. He really is in deep thought when Reva asks him this, and it's hard to tell exactly what he's feeling, but he's definitely questioning it himself. Where were you when he was killing my friends? Reva asked. Although her end goal is now we know to get to Vader, she still holds Obi-Wan responsible for Anakin's fall to the dark side, and at least a little bit responsible for what happened to her family and the other younglings. I don't need you. I don't need anyone, Reva says. You won't stop him alone. You have no idea what I've done alone. Again, hinting that there's even more to Reva's backstory, even more to her. Then the battle begins. Reva cuts her way through the door. The stormtroopers advance on the rebels. It's a very stunning and fun fight to watch. The choreography of the fighting, you see stormtroopers falling, you see rebels falling. We see the rebels trying to hold them off, but what it seems the stormtroopers are going to continue to advance. Tala makes a stand. With protection from Ned B. So shout out to another great Star Wars droid. They've been coming out like all these in the sequel movies with BB-8, or whether it's in the live action stuff. They're coming out with all these droids, and they're so good. And they you just love them. I don't know what it is about Ned B. He doesn't even talk. He doesn't say a word, but you just love Ned B. So he protects Tala as Tala sacrifices herself, sealing the rebels inside and taking out a lot of stormtroopers by activating a thermal detonator. Later, when Leia asks Obi-Wan where Tala is, he just shakes his head and kind of puts his hand on her shoulder. There's just so much emotion that you can feel the weight and the impact that Tala had on both Obi-Wan and Leia. I talked earlier about how I felt about Tala, and this stuff is very emotional. It's hard to watch. Even rewatching it a couple times, I still get kind of I get a little choked up. She was a great character and a great example of hope. She's clearly motivated and sacrifices herself for something bigger. It's very admirable. And it goes to show the sacrifices that are made in Star Wars, in the rebellion, and standing up for what's right. It's very Rogue One of Tala. This makes Obi-Wan rethink his plan. But he won't be able to hold off another push. Obi-Wan decides to give himself up, which is exactly what Vader knew was going to happen. He tells Reva and her troops to stand down. Kenobi is already ours. We cut back to the training session. Anakin's in a powerful position. There's no way out, Master. Admit you are beaten. Obi-Wan turns himself into Reva, telling Roken that Vader wants him. He'll keep coming, Roken said. Obi-Wan, in response, that's why I have to stop him. Obi-Wan gives Haja his blaster, his lightsaber, and the holocom, telling him to look out for Leia, assuming he turns over his weapon as to not really pose a threat to Reva. You're going to tell me you're going to go fight without a weapon? Says Roken. There are other ways to fight. Again, we get more of this chess match between Obi-Wan and Vader. He's on his way. You're going to die soon, Reva tells Obi-Wan. You're not bringing him to me. I'm bringing him to you. Obi-Wan, still knowing that conflict that Reva has. He compels Reva to consider his plan. Don't let him do what he did to your family, to those families behind those doors. We could end this together, Obi-Wan tells her. Reva shakes her head. What makes you think he won't see it coming? Because all he will see is me. Reva sends him back inside for holding, seemingly accepting his plan, kind of knowing that Obi-Wan can get away from two stormtroopers. We see more of the sparring and training session. Anakin is able to disarm Obi-Wan. Weapon is gone. It's over. Your need for victory, Anakin, it blinds you. Vader approaches the base. It's very Professor Snape-like with his cape flowing behind him. That's immediately what I thought of. He goes in after Obi-Wan. Reva almost smirking a little bit as he walks in the base alone. Seeing that Obi-Wan is right, completely blinded to what's around him, this is her chance. Leia, who survived the attack from Lola, removes the restraining bolt and they get the hangar doors open. The rebels are ready for takeoff. Vader approaches. He ends up force pulling the ship and tearing it apart, only to realize it to be the wrong one. Vader, too blind and focused on Obi-Wan, doesn't realize it's the wrong ship. We see one more flashback of the training sequence. Obi-Wan, who is disarmed, ends up disarming Anakin after thinking he has won. Your need to prove yourself is your undoing, he says. We then get an amazing facial expression from both Hayden and Ewan here, both mirroring a similar reaction to a conversation that they have in episode 3 after returning from defeating Dooku. As it is now, Obi-Wan is right, and he ends up winning this chess match for now. In his blindness, Reva strikes. Albeit, she probably could have timed it a little bit better. Maybe when he was trying to force pull the ship down, she could have probably got a good shot in on him, but I don't know. Vader's able to stop the strike with her actually still behind him, which is actually really sick. He was wise to use you against me, Vader says. again, Vader like kind of tipping his cap to Obi-Wan here. It seems like they were kind of both playing out this training sequence in their mind at the same time, and he kind of knows like, yeah, hey, he got me here. Riva doesn't hold back, trying everything that she can, but just gets absolutely manhandled by Vader. He doesn't even like pull out his own lightsaber. I think it's really cool how he continually like stops her mid-swing, and we saw this back in part 1 actually when the Grand Inquisitor stopped Riva from killing the Jedi on Tatooine. It's really sick. Just like being able to physically stop somebody who's putting their full force into trying to kill you, and you just hold them in their position. It's wild. I love it. Vader did learn a little something from Obi-Wan as he's able to pull Riva's lightsaber from her hand, like we saw Obi-Wan do in the sparring session. Vader takes her blade, which is the sick Inquisitor double-sided blade. He takes it apart and throws her one of the blades. He's not letting her off that easy. He wants a fight, and he loves the challenge. A great and literal example of Vader just playing with his food. He has Riva beat then and there after taking her lightsaber, but he won't let her go off without a fight. Vader like feeds off of it. He loves that challenge. And I will use this as a direct reasoning as to why Vader let Obi-Wan go. And I say that with air quotes because I don't necessarily know if he let him go or not. It's kind of up for interpretation. But in part 3, Obi-Wan is able to escape past the flames. And Vader just doesn't want to just win. He lives for like the challenge and the thrill that he gets from beating the opponent when they have tried at every opportunity to beat him, when they are at their very best. And the Riva and Vader duel is really amazing, and Vader just again manhandles her, ultimately ends up winning, gaining control of both lightsabers. And as he's holding both of them, Riva's on her knees. I thought he was going to straight up Count Dooku her. But he ends up just stabbing her. And one last parallel I want to touch on here from outside of this episode itself is the Ahsoka parallels that I noticed in these last few minutes. Vader pulling the ship out of the air, preventing it from taking off, reminds me of when not only Rey doing it in episode 9, but Ahsoka in season 7 of the Clone Wars, force holding. She ultimately doesn't end up pulling the ship all the way in because she lets the ship go to save Rex. Whole nother thing. Great TV show. Again, watch it. We see the parallel of Ahsoka trying to pull this ship in, just as Vader does here. But the cooler one that I noticed actually, and I know a lot of people saw this too, but it's when we see Vader dual wielding and at least holding those two lightsabers when he pulls the second one back in. He strikes a pose here. He's in a stance which looks like the exact same stance that Ahsoka would be using. And it's not the first time that we've seen Anakin dual wield lightsabers. He did it a few times in the Clone Wars TV show. And at least to my knowledge, I've never seen him actually use the same stance as Ahsoka. So I thought that was really cool. Maybe it's like foreshadowing to something for maybe Ahsoka to come. Maybe it's some like light symbolism that he's still thinking about her and where she ended up after Order 66 and after she left the Jedi and after he left the Jedi. I don't know. I thought they were really cool parallels. Vader starts approaching Riva. She's on her knees, and we see the fear and terror that Riva is feeling, much like she felt on the night of Order 66. See the flashbacks of Anakin intercut with Vader walking towards her, making it seem like Anakin actually stabbed Riva back when she was a youngling, the flashback mirroring the present, even from the point of Vader and Anakin stabbing her with a lightsaber and pulling it out. You can see both Anakin and Vader do this from Riva's perspective. And as Riva lies on the ground, in comes the Grand Inquisitor. He's looking clean, he's fresh, he's alive. And again, we knew in some capacity, whether it was a clone or himself, that he was alive because of Star Wars Rebels. He comes in and assumes his role of Grand Inquisitor once again, and they leave Riva, quote, in the gutter where you belong, as the Grand Inquisitor has so often put it. He does look a little worse for wear here, seemingly having darker, marks under his eyes and along the sides of his head. He's starting to look more like the Grand Inquisitor interpretation that we see in Star Wars Rebels. Vader said to Reva, "Did you really believe I did not see it, youngling?" Vader knew in some form that Reva was at the temple that night, which is very interesting. This makes it seem like Vader knew Reva's desires, but ultimately wanted her around because he knew she would help him find Obi-Wan, seemingly planning to kill her once they had him. But once she turned on him, Vader really had no choice there. But this kind of begs the question of why not finish her off right there. Will Vader maybe keep tabs on her, knowing that she will probably still go after Obi-Wan, especially since Obi-Wan didn't help her at all like he said he would? I do think keeping her alive is interesting, but I think he knows that she has so much hate for Obi-Wan and the Jedi that she won't turn to the Jedi even after all of this. Reva, still holding on, doesn't seem like she's dead yet, finds the broken hollow and hears the message. Bail notifying Obi-Wan that he's going to Tatooine to watch over the boy at Owen's farm. Obviously, Reva knows Owen, the farmer. They having met back in the first episode, and she actually almost killed him, or was starting to kill him. She knew then that he was hiding something, not knowing that it was a boy and that Obi-Wan was there to watch over him. She has a way to get to Obi-Wan to seek revenge yet again. And this is where we end the episode, and it puts us in a very interesting position for the finale. Reva now not necessarily light or dark, but kind of in this gray area. And it's seeming like she's going to go after Luke. At least that's what the end of that episode's made it seem like. But Obi-Wan and the Rebels, they can't escape the Empire off of Jabim with their hyperdrive down. So my predictions for what's next is maybe we see some cameos to help our Rebels out, help them escape. The Rebels will have to get probably some help to get away from the Empire, seeing that they're on a transport that's, I'm assuming, unarmed. Maybe we see an introduction of some other Rebels. Maybe there's like a new cell we don't know about. Maybe we see like Saw Gerrera come in and help, or Ahsoka with some Rebels. Maybe that could have been a reason that we saw some of those Ahsoka parallels in this episode. I'm honestly not really sure, and I'm not really banking on any big cameos like those, but I think it's still a possibility and something that you could discuss. One thing I would put like 99% sure on is that Vader and Obi-Wan are going to fight again in this last episode. It seems like it has to happen for a show about these two characters, only to have them fight once and have that be in the third episode in the middle of the season doesn't really make much sense. It seems like they have to have some kind of confrontation here once again to close out the show. And ultimately, there are two major loose ends to tie up here. And it could be possible. I have seen some runtimes. I don't want to say leaked, but I've seen some runtimes on Twitter for the final episode, showing that it's at an hour and a half long, which is insane for an episode. It's like a short movie at that point. Now, some people are saying that this runtime is also taking into account a Q&A session, but all of this is unconfirmed. The runtime is long, which, like I said, was confirmed on some posts on Twitter of people buying tickets to see the final episode in a movie theater, which is really cool. But it's unclear if the Q&A is included in that runtime. I've seen posts that say with Q&A, I've seen posts that say without. Who knows? We'll find out in a couple days anyway, right? But regardless, if we have a long runtime, maybe it's possible that they tie up both of these. But I'm not exactly sure how is Obi-Wan going to help the Rebels fight Vader, get back to Tatooine, stop Reva in time before she gets to Luke, because we know that Luke never leaves Tatooine until A New Hope. And he doesn't think the Jedi are real either, as we find him in A New Hope. So he, at least I hope, doesn't see Obi-Wan and Reva fight. And again, this is assuming Reva is going to or ends up on Tatooine to find Luke. And what I could see happening is Obi-Wan stops the Empire, helps the Rebels escape, returns to Tatooine, finds Reva there, not necessarily with Luke, but just finds her there, and then boom, end of the season, bring on season 2. And I know there's some rumors that a second season may be in the works. I actually saw a quote from Deborah Chow, the director of all of the episodes of Obi-Wan Kenobi, saying that there's definitely still more stories to tell. So this kind of begs the question: if did they decide this during the season? Maybe they changed the ending, or they had like a possibility of an alternate ending in case they wanted to make another season. It seems pretty likely. Like, in my opinion, it would have made sense for Vader to kill Reva in part 5. But because she got away and knows about Luke, and now we're kind of already setting up a second season right there. And it seems like there is too much loose ends to be tied up in this one last episode of the season, unless, like I said, unless it's an hour and a half, maybe they have enough time to do it. But maybe I'm wrong. Just in general, maybe Reva gets involved and helps the rebels escape, or tries to stop them from escaping. Maybe she dies in the process and never makes it to Tatooine. I'm not really sure. But whatever may happen, it seems like we're in for a very exciting episode of television. I can't wait to see where it goes. And that's all I have for you guys today. Thank you guys so much for listening. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe on YouTube, Chance C on YouTube. Follow me on Twitch, twitch.tv/Chance C. And follow me on Twitter, at @ChanceC_TTV. I'll catch you guys in a couple of days for the finale of Obi-Wan Kenobi. It should be something interesting. We should have a lot to discuss. If it is a super long runtime, which may or may not happen, it could be that the podcast isn't out until Friday. I'm gonna try to get it done as soon as I can. But if it's super long, I got a lot to look through and a lot to break down. It could be a longer podcast. It could be something that doesn't come out until Friday. Just like a little heads up there. But I wanted to thank you guys again for listening, and I hope to see you guys next time. Thanks.